Hi, my name is Reverend Dale Brown, and I get to be the senior pastor of the community church at Ocean Pines and a part of the pastoral team for the cooperative parish that includes Community Church and Bates and Trinity United Methodist Churches in Newark and Snow Hill. I want you to think with me for a moment today about a story from the Old Testament. In fact, for the next couple of days, we're going to do stories from the Old Testament that I think are important to know for our faith. Today, I'd like you to think about Abraham. We all know Father Abraham, that song where you do all kinds of gestures and things like that. But Abraham was much more than just a children's song learned at Vacation Bible School. Genesis 11 and chapters 12 begin to tell the story of Abram and Sarai, as they leave their home in Ur of the Chaldees to journey to the promised land that God is giving them. Now, it marks a change because God speaks to Abram. Abram has never heard God's voice before. And God says to Abram, take everything that you have, pack it up, and take a long journey to a place where I'm giving you as a home, as a land. And I'm sure that Abram had questions. If Abram didn't, I'm positive that Sarah did. But Abram, not really knowing this God well, packs everything, his possessions, his animals, his family, and they head off, traveling by foot to go to the promised land. Did they have a map? No. Did they have GPS? No. They didn't have satellite imagery or anything. They just knew to follow where God told them to go and to avoid the places that God told them to avoid. I'm sure at the end of the day, Sarah would turn to Abram and say, "Are we there yet?" And he would say, "I don't know, but I'm sure God does." Have you ever taken a trip with no destination? They're some of the coolest trips you can take. When I was a kid, we would take Sunday afternoon rides, and eventually we would almost always end up at my grandparents' home or farm, but we would just ride and look at the beautiful foliage or see houses that were falling down or talk about who lived there or what happened there. Some of those trips without intended destinations are kind of cool. But there was a destination to this trip. It was the promised land that God was giving to Abram and to Sarai and their descendants. But they began that journey not knowing where they were going, not knowing how far they would travel, not knowing where it would take them. And the journey was made by foot. And Abram was a wealthy man with all of these people and possessions. It was slow going, very slow travel. Abram is known to us in Hebrews as the great example of faith in the Old Testament. An example of a person who heard God's voice and did exactly what God told him to do. We think about Abram as our example. An example of faith that when God calls us to go and serve or to take this action or to speak this word, do we listen or do we miss the opportunity? Oftentimes when God calls us, we don't know the destination. We don't know the outcome. But for those things, we trust God. So today, how is it with your faith? How willing are you to listen to God's call on your life and to do that call whether it takes risk or not, just to follow after God, to live by faith and not by sight. And if you're really crazy and want to take a risk, you can sing and do the motions to Father Abraham as well. Maybe it's more important that we live the faith of Abram than if we do the song itself. May God bless you.